hello, everybody, and welcome to the Curious Realm coverage of the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, the Bigfoot Capitol of Texas. We have with us right now Jason Mclean. How you been, man?
So far, so good, man. Appreciate you coming out.
The author of Metroplex Monsters. We have had him on before talking about pterosaurs, other cryptids in Texas. I always love seeing you here at the shows. You've always got a vendor table set up. Tell us a little bit about some of the recent research you've been doing, things like that, man.
So we've been actually spending a lot of time out in Thackerville, Brown Springs. It's, start off more as a Sasquatch area, and we've had daytime sightings there, right? However, it became very, very apparent that there was a high supernatural presence there, and so one of the things that's helped us do is actually sort of realize that there is a distinct separation between the two. So one of the big things we're talking about in the channel now on Texas Front Porch is that everyone wants to either be, it's like they're an aper or they're into the woo side, which, by the way, if you're a paranormal Bigfooter, come up with something different, because woo it's like that. Only Ric Flair should be able to get away with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What I think is really happening is people are fighting over the name, right? They're Bigfoot and Sasquatch. It's like, why don't we open that box back up and say, why don't we actually look at what's being observed? What are people actually coming across? What are they running across? What are they reporting? And you start noticing very distinct patterns that at least indicate that perhaps what we're looking at is two different phenomena. One is a naturally existing creature. Again, this is the hypothesis. And then the other is a paranormal entity, right? Mm-hmm. Or rather, probably even a range of phenomena.
And I believe it was you that I had on that we were talking about is specifically the paranormal side? Yes. Is it the fact that it is Bigfoot, or is it the fact that it is something else that is actively using what we are comfortable with and okay with accepting?
Yeah, no, exactly. One of the examples I use is if you wake up and you open your tent and there's this giant dark figure with red glowing eyes, not eye shine, self-luminous eyes. It's Bigfoot. You do it and you wake up in your bed in your home, it's a demon or a shadow person or etc. It's the same phenomena, just seen in two different locations, going by two different names. Yeah. So either we are putting that on it, or it is deciding to change its appearance to make us more comfortable with it. And maybe even to hide what it really is. Because once it becomes Bigfoot, we're like, oh, it's a Bigfoot, and we move on. We don't realize that there's this other aspect to it, which does open a whole host of questions.
Absolutely. But to begin with, the paranormal side of Bigfoot opens a whole host of questions. There's a host of questions to a biological side.
Yes.
Is there, and a lot of people think, I've even been guilty of saying it, that the paranormal side, a lot of the shows, things like that focus on that, kind of pull away from some of the actual hard physical research going on, which may be the case. But at the same time, I think that it is important for us to look at both sides of this phenomena, because even with the biological sightings of Bigfoot, things like that, there have been, the only way to explain it is paranormal happenings in the same location. Be they UFO sightings, portals, what have you.
Well, Thackerville is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Where we have both sort of seemingly observed at the same time. So let me put this giant caveat, one giant asterisk on the entire hypothesis.
Please.
Right, that there is a natural existing phenomena. We don't know if if a paranormal entity takes physical form. We don't know what kind of evidence it would lead. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, we'd have to be able to prove paranormal to begin with.
Exactly. And so it's like, I've got, again, Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demons, Fort Worth Goatmen, and other terrors of the Trinity River. I've got an account of a lechusa that is clearly impacting the physical world.
Lechusa, just for our audience that is not aware of the phenomenon.
Right. So think of a harpy from the Greek legends. Yeah. Essentially, it's a human-sized owl, but the face of a woman. That's the lechusa is sort of the Hispanic name for it. So from Latin America. There's other versions, but again, easiest would be the harpies of the Greeks, right? But this thing was clearly physically interacting with the natural world, but it was clearly not a natural creature. The rest of the story shows that this is a paranormal entity. And again, the situation, it's a paranormal entity.
Much like Mothman, things like that.
Right, exactly. And so it's like, well, here's a paranormal creature interacting with the physical world. The Bible talks about angels taking physical form, eating, doing things, the Watchers creating the Nephilim. So the question becomes with the natural Bigfoot, my big giant caveat to all this is we don't have a body. And honestly, we have the Sasquatch albivernix tests coming probably the next year.
Sure.
Right?
Got a presentation about it going on as we speak.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Shelley Covington-Montana has done a lot of fabulous work on this.
Absolutely.
Doug Hychek as well. So this is one of those things where I think when these tests come back, we're going to know one way or the other, because the question becomes, okay, this skin oil is either skin oil with DNA in it and in a specific chemical composition, or it's another material, right? And the problem is, if it becomes another material, then we got a whole other set of questions.
Absolutely.
The question becomes, if a paranormal entity can take physical form, what kind of evidence would it leave? And that's a question that we don't really have answered. We don't have a good response to that. So I think within the next within the next 5 years, we're going to have either better evidence for there being a physical Sasquatch, a naturally existing Sasquatch, or we're going to have to start facing some really hard questions. Now, I still, like I said, that's my caveat, is I'm still working from that hypothesis. So once these other tests come in, I think we will find that there is a naturally existing Bigfoot. But I think we need to also not get rid of the paranormal aspect.
Yeah, we can't really close the door on those questions.
Nor
because
should we.
Once again, even if the physical evidence proves an animal, we still have to find out the phenomenology of the background and what else was going on at that time.
Right, because there's this other question, and I think we've done a disservice to like the native lore on
Oh,
this.
absolutely.
Because if you look at the native lore and you compare it to other like lore of the Fae from Europe or the Oni of Japan, you start seeing very specific overlaps that you can't just say, oh, well, people come up with the same ideas, right? It's like, yeah, that goes so far. But when you see very similar overlaps, again, the Lechusa and the Harpy are a great example. The Goatman and Pan, or the Leshy of Indo-Russia, or the Shahadim of the Hebrew. Like, there's clearly this paranormal phenomena that is occurring all around the world, and people are interacting with it. We see it with Bigfoot. There was a tribe in Alaska who's, again, I'm terrible with names, but they talk about how you're not supposed to eat salmon that a Sasquatch gives you, because if you do, you stay in their world. Well, that's identical to fairy lore that we see in Europe, where it's, if you eat their food, you stay in their world. And you start seeing, again, very similar overlaps with the UFO phenomena, right? Where time doesn't work the same way. They seem to be shapeshifters. So it's like, the problem is there's this larger paranormal entity or phenomena that it's like, well, you can either do one or both. It's like, no, maybe the world's more complicated than that.
Well, and we've had conversations with quite a few MUFON researchers, stuff like that. Kathleen Martin specifically, Sev Talk, and the idea that abductions, that kind of stuff, have started taking on a more paranormal quality. And even those that have experienced abduction or close encounter have begun having more paranormal experiences.
Right.
And this is like notated in the research, things like that.
Oh, for a long time.
And it's really interesting to see them making that correlation right now. Even experiencers coming back from their experience with healing qualities, the ability to ESP, things like that. It's pretty remarkable. Now, when it comes to Bigfoot, things like that, have you noticed over the last few years an increase in sightings, including paranormal?
I think it's more that people are willing to come out and talk about it. Okay. Because if you really look, it's always sort of been there. It's just used to be called the Fae, or it was something else, right? Angels, demons. But that's why I really think that the Bigfoot nomenclature has been put on this deliberately. That this paranormal phenomena is trying to mask itself as Bigfoot, because then we just say, oh, it's Bigfoot, and we move on.
Sure.
We don't really recognize it for what it is, and I think that's definitely part of the phenomena. Now, again, the UFO phenomena is a thing unto itself, and I do think that honestly, I think the CIA and the DoD are playing a much larger role in how that's being handled. So we'll put that to the side. But like the paranormal aspect of the UFO phenomena is also so closely connected to, again, like elvish lore, like the lore of the of the Fae and those kinds of things, and not just the Fae. That's sort of a catch-all term. It's in line with a ton of different traditions, and so the question becomes: maybe this phenomena is, we tend to say, well, maybe it's trying to hide itself, and I think that's a good possibility. But maybe it's also that we are creating what these things look like by our expectations.
Well, yeah, like we were saying, the entity that is appearing as these paranormal Bigfoot is definitely using our own impression of what we are looking for, what we are out there for, what we are the experience that we are open to.
Oh, yes.
And using that to its advantage.
Yeah.
Now, where do you fall in the camp? Because a minute ago you mentioned the CIA, alphabet agencies, things like that. Where do you fall in the idea that they have a part in covering up Bigfoot? There has been, over the last many years, a going hypothesis that the government is fully aware of Bigfoot. Right. They're cool with Bigfoot. That's why it's a protected species in Oregon. But that they know that they're out in the national parks and that they are hiding the fact.
That's a great question. I'm ambivalent is not the right word. I would say I'm kind of 50-50 on how much, because I think there's this thing where we assume everything's either, like, the government is hyper competent and does everything very deliberately, when sometimes it's just they don't know what to do with something, and it's like, well, why don't we just leave this alone and not talk about it? And also create a culture of, if you talk about this, then you're crazy, you're an idiot, right?
Sure.
They have a mainstream narrative that they want to push, and so it's less. So maybe a lot of this it's less cover up and more they don't want to deal with this because it isn't part of a narrative that they enjoy talking about. And so it's like, we'll just shun those people, so it becomes unpopular to talk. Again, my encounter with the pterosaur, I knew I couldn't talk about it. Yeah. And I believe these things were still alive in Texas, but it's just so far south. I'm like, they couldn't be around Dallas, Texas, right? I knew Ken Gerhardt for years before I talked about it. So that, shame is a real phenomenon.
Oh, absolutely.
And that peer pressure will keep people silent.
Yep.
So I think...
it's really a self-regulating system.
Correct. Now, that being said, am I going to sit here and say with ontological certitude that the government isn't hiding these things deliberately?
No.
Well, I'm certainly not about to say that.
No.
Because maybe they are, right?
Who knows?
I think it may be just be like, again, for me, everything's a pie, obviously. But, it just depends on how large a slice of the pie it is, right? How much of this is the government actually knowing what's going on and saying, we need to hide this because it absolutely goes against whatever narrative that they find to be most politically convenient.
Yeah.
And that may be a tiny sliver, may be 90% of the pie, and then the rest of it is, we'll just create this culture of shame because we want this very atheistic Darwinian viewpoint, because to them, that's more advantageous.
Sure.
Right? Because think about it. This is, again, the phrase, the science, has that's become its own, that's not science. If you say the science, that's not science. That's religion.
Science is admitting you know about 70%.
Yeah.
And the rest we'll figure out along the way. And our 70% may utterly change because of that 30%.
Exactly.
And we're okay with that.
Right. And that's the thing is with sciences we get new technology. The science helps us build new technology. That new technology shows us things we didn't know, and then we have to change the science so we keep growing. That's how it's supposed to be seen. Yeah. And the problem is anyone who steps outside this very narrow window of exploration, you stop being a scientist and you become a florist. You stop becoming an archaeologist and you become a shoemaker. And
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because here in the last year since we met, I've been to the International Remote Viewing Association, International Association of Near-Death Studies Conference, MUFON, things like that. And there are some contiguous names throughout that, and people that research in all of those fields. Now, for instance, Robert Bigelow, Hal Puthoff, things like that. And I had somebody here recently in my group mention the fact that they love one guest that I have, but they don't like the other guest because he doesn't say as much as the other one. And I'm like, okay, well, you have to remember, at one point, guest B was actually read on to stuff.
Yeah.
He actively worked at a lab for the U.S. government and wrote algorithms and things like that. So there are things that he literally cannot talk about.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about people in the range of Hal Puthoff, that kind of stuff, I literally put forth the fact that when these strange new sciences come up, they just read them onto it.
Yeah.
Because now you got to keep your mouth shut. And we can talk about it behind closed doors and how it relates to Bigfoot, how it relates to UAPs, how it relates to electric vehicles and how we can monetize it, whatever.
Right.
But now you're read on and you can't go out and talk to Time Magazine.
Yes. Exactly.
And they literally keep these people inside this insular system and read them on to all of these topics.
Exactly.
So even if it's the fact of they're researching portals at Skinwalker Ranch, and a thing pops out of it and walks by and goes into another portal.
Yeah.
And this is a report from more than one person on that research team.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, now we're talking about portals with Bigfoot.
Yep.
Now, so,
look at Nick Redfern talked about this for years ago, that he had, again, anytime it's a government whistleblower, you kind of have to just say, okay, let's keep it at arm's length. It's interesting data, but you can't say it 100%. But they were talking about how at Area 51 that they were using Babylonian practices to communicate with the aliens, right? And that's like, well, what's going on there? Like, what the heck is that? Now, is it real?
Stargate type stuff.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's weird. Again, maybe it's disinformation, right? But there is this, we can't reject the occult connection with advanced technology.
Absolutely.
Right? Obviously, the big one is Jack Parsons, and then I just forgot his name. The rocket scientist from not the Nazi rocket scientist we brought over. Oh my gosh!
I just blanked on it.
Yeah,
too. Oh my God! Project Paperclip.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Von Braun.
Yeah, Von Braun.
Von Braun.
I just said Goddard. It's not Goddard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Von Braun. Well, it's like Von Braun. What? Again, there's the question. Well, how Nazi was he? It's like, well, he was Nazi enough to not get killed. Like that's the thing.
Nazi enough to be given a lot of money for research.
Exactly. Precisely. And we know that he was dabbling in the occult when he was there, and that comes over here. Jack Parsons, intimately connected to the occult. We see this tradition today with CERN. Like, it's art projects. I'm sorry. What kind of? These are not art projects. These are
really
clearly
wild art projects.
Yeah, it's and of course, it's like, oh well, what about this? I use the word in quotation, mock sacrifice that happened like last year. We're like, oh, just some of our scientists were just pulling a prank.
Yeah.
Who performs a mock sacrifice as a prank? And let's pretend it was a mock sacrifice for just a moment.
I mean, cremation of care.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like, don't get me wrong. Okay, fine. Let's say no one actually died. Okay,
sure.
I'll give you that.
Sure. Is the intent still not there?
Right. It's like, is this not weird enough on its own? And again,
it's kind of why I don't play with Ouija boards, even if it's a game on a Saturday night. It is about the intent of the actions. And guess what? You don't need the Ouija board.
Yeah.
There's the frightening part. All you need is the intent.
Oh, you want a good story on Ouija boards? Go talk to Bob, my friend over at Van Buren Varieties. He has a really intense story because, and that's one of those things where you open up.
I don't even want one in my house, and I really want a vintage Ouija board.
It's like it's an occult device, and that's the thing. And again, I'm not sold that someone wasn't actually sacrificed at CERN. It's like, who was this person, and can we do a side-by-side comparison? Do you have them walking around?
There's even the whole hypothesis that the whole guise of the first Gulf War was for us to go and actively take technology, Babylonian technology from Saddam Hussein, Stargate technology.
Well,
things like that.
I don't even necessarily think it's technology. I think it is clearly paranormal.
Knowledge is technology.
Yeah.
Knowledge is technology.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Yeah, I like that. But the simple fact is we can't separate this deep occult with this high technology. No. We can't separate people talking about speaking with these other beings and high technology. And the fact that we keep seeing these weird, bizarre rituals happening, like, oh, they're art projects. No, stop that. Yeah. An art project, like, I know what an art project looks like. I'm an artist. These are not art projects. Y'all are performing things. Because I know what that looks like, too.
Yeah, that's still performance art, but it's still,
Yeah, and so it's like we can't separate these two. And I think there's a bigger story there.
Absolutely.
That, again, we have a narrative, right? I was talking about the narrative that the government wants, which is a very purely atheistic Darwinian perspective. And think about it, that you can teach that in school.
So what do you think will happen to, I guess, the paradigm then of Bigfoot research when they are provided with that Darwinian research?
Right.
You know, things like right now we've got scientists looking at footprints and actively showing like, no, this ain't fake. Like, here's the ridge lines. Here's like, this is an actual thing. And these are... They aren't fringe scientists. They are like mainstream biologists and things like that. You may not hear it on Bigfoot encounters or things like that regularly.
Yeah, no. So again, I think that's important, right? Because there's a difference between they're looking at the biological reality, right? Whatever their perspective is, they're looking at objective reality, and I'm groovy with that. We should look at that because, like I said, my caveat is I think there is a natural Bigfoot that exists. I think that's a very, very small population. I think the problem is we're seeing this other paranormal stuff that either because we want it to be or it wants us to think it is, it's getting lumped in with the Bigfoot. We need to separate those two things out. Again, whatever your perspective is, as long as we're looking at objective material, groovy. Come with whatever perspective you want, whether you're a creationist or you're an atheist, I don't care, right? As long as we can look at it and talk about it openly and honestly, I'm down for the conversation. The problem is the conversation has been either you're an aper or you're into the woo. And I think we need to say, hold up, let's break this box apart and let's look at the actual phenomena each time and start seeing larger patterns. And once you do that, you start noticing there is this other world that the mainstream wants us to not look at that way when it's clearly got a connection. All I'm saying is let's look at all things openly and honestly with transparency, and just tell us what your biases are so we can put that into the mix as well.
Well, and you have to admit that you have your biases, you know? I mean, that's one big reason I harp on it all the time on the show. If you're out doing paranormal research, don't hit stop and rewind.
Yeah.
Don't hit stop and rewind on set.
Yes.
Like, even whenever I worked with bands, I would give them their CD at the end of the night and tell them, listen to that Sunday.
Yeah.
Like, listen to that at your next rehearsal. Give it 3 or 4 days before, because otherwise you will literally pick yourself and your performance apart.
Yeah.
And not in the right way.
Correct.
Not in like the football footage way that you're supposed to be doing it.
Precisely. And that's this big thing, right? And this other problem is this sanitizing of information where...
Absolutely.
You know, whether it's MUFON, BFRO, and every other organization I've met, right? All of them. It's, well, here's the parts of the stories we like, and here's the stuff we don't like, and we get rid of them. And I'm just saying, let's put all the stories out there openly so we can... Because, again, I say with my caveat that if there is a natural Bigfoot... That's a hypothesis that I have, and I may be wrong. Like I said, I think in the next 5 years we're going to know whether there is one or not. Honestly, because we're getting to that point where, particularly with the Sasquatch Albivernex, whatever comes back on that, I think is going to really shape this argument moving forward. Because, like I said,
especially with the new lifting of oil prints, things like that in the last few years, that kind of stuff.
No, exactly. Because
even the work that was put forth in Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed,
exactly.
phenomenal
good
information.
Science. Again, it's not the science; it's good science, right? Again, the problem is we don't have the Spookatron 5000 to be able to properly, objectively observe paranormal phenomena, right? So we have to understand that there's a line there. Like there is, we just need to be able to say, okay, here's the paranormal stuff, here's the physical stuff, and maybe these two are intimately connected in ways that we don't fully understand. Maybe it's the same phenomena, but we're not going to be able to know, but maybe they are two separate phenomena.
Maybe one phenomena is attracted to the other.
Exactly. Or maybe what we have is like, again, a wolf and a deer.
Yeah.
They show up in the same spots, but they're not the same animal.
And like any animal in the wild, they have an acute sense of reality of their surroundings that we do not.
Exactly.
That is woods that they traipse through all the time, and if there is something that is amiss, they are distinctly aware of it.
Right.
Whether it's a deer, a hog, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Something's amiss, and this is not the normal trail I'm going down.
Yeah, something is not right.
So
here.
even to think that
we have
perhaps Bigfoot being a large hominid, would be curious of these things the same way that we are.
Yeah,
you know,
maybe they have some perception of them, and they're like,
guaranteed
hey, let's
they
go.
have a better perception of them.
It's like, let's go hang out with, again, we'd call them fae or angels or demons or whatever. Like maybe they just recognize them for what they are. So we have basically 3 avenues but we need to know which one we need to explore.
Absolutely.
We need all of the evidence on the table. That's the only thing I want. I want all evidence on the table, and open and honest and transparent, so we can do good science and actually figure out, see where there are patterns. Where are the patterns diverging ways we don't expect them to? Absolutely. Are they coming together in ways we don't expect them to? That's my only thing. I think we need to really open this box back up and take a better look at it, a more objective view of it, and we kind of need to say, look, this is the perspective I'm coming from, but I want all the information. We got to stop sanitizing. We got to be open to possibilities that maybe we don't like. And worldviews that maybe that we find alien or unfamiliar, and accept and just say, okay, everything's on the table, let's explore.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time today.
Appreciate you, Chris.
Let everybody know where they can get their copy of Metroplex Monsters. Let them know about Texas Front Porch, all that good stuff.
So again, pretty much anywhere where fine books and trashy rags are sold.
That's it.
Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com are probably the easiest ways to find us. But again, you can find me 3 times a week on Texas. I don't know if y'all can see it. Texas Front Porch, TEX' Front Porch on YouTube. I'm live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. We got 6 shows on there, so and we're live twice on Thursday. So if you got something, we probably have something for you. But yeah, we have a lot of fun. Come on by, say howdy.
Well, thank you so much for your time. While you're online checking out everything from Texas Front Porch, getting your copy of Metroplex Monsters, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm.
Yes.
That is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can find all of our live coverage from events. Stay tuned right after this, folks. We will have more interviews coming to you from the Texas Bigfoot Conference here in Jefferson, Texas, right after this. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault on our website, curiousrealm.com. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast services, as well as YouTube, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV through the APR TV app, available on all app markets. Curious Realm is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more great content or to become a sponsor of Curious Realm or other podcasts, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious. And remember, the other side is always watching.